Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. I've been watching climate scientists for about a dozen years and have come to the inevitable conclusion that what they're doing has nothing to do with science. They behave more like snake oil salesmen than scientists. Here's an excellent example in the news this week. There it is right there on the Canadian television website. Blame climate change for record water levels in the Great Lakes. Prof. Wednesday, August 7th, 2019. Climate change is a deciding factor in record high water levels in the Great Lakes being higher than ever before. A University of Waterloo professor told CTV's Your Morning on Wednesday. According to government statistics, July water levels for the bodies of water between Canada and the U.S. were at record highs. So Canadian researchers are saying that global warming is causing record high water levels on the Great Lakes. That's amazing, because 20 years ago they predicted the exact opposite. Chicago Tribune, Friday, March 30th, 2001. Canadian Model Predictions. Models are based on the entire Great Lakes basin. Water levels could drop between 2 and 5 feet, and winter temperatures are going to shoot way up, 7 to 10 degrees. And they predicted that snow was going to start turning into rain. And here's the front page of the Green Bay Press Gazette from May 27, 2001, Low Water Frustration. And then they had an article inside that edition titled Global Warming Would Lower Lakes. If global warming is happening, it will almost certainly lead to lower lake levels, Sunas said. His team examined a handful of global warming computer models and concluded that the water levels in the Great Lakes would likely fall from 1.5 to 8 feet. And this guy's a professor of atmospheric sciences at the University of Michigan, so he must know what he's talking about. So if global warming is happening, it will almost certainly lead to lower lake levels. And not only is it causing low water levels, but global warming is also causing record high levels. And at the same time global warming is causing record high lake levels, it's also causing lake levels to plummet. There it is again in the Detroit Free Press, June 21, 2009. Big climate change headed Michigan's way, study says. Scientists say that Great Lakes water levels are definitely going to plummet because of global warming. So now let's look at the actual history of Great Lakes water levels going back 100 years from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This is water levels right now, which they're calling a record high, even though there's been many other peaks just about as large in the past. On some of the lakes, this year's peak is a little bit higher than in the past, and I guess that little tiny bit there is the straw that broke the camel's back. That's definitely due to climate change, they say. So I annotated the graph to help explain climate science. All of these peaks in the past were natural, but the current one is man-made. Yep, the 1930s peak was natural, the 1950s peak was natural, the 1970s, 80s, and 90s peaks were natural, but the current one is man-made. And climate scientists know this because their job depends on just talking complete nonsense. So let's look at what's actually going on at the Great Lakes and do some actual science. This is the Great Lakes ice cover graph from Environment Canada. And you can see that 4 of the last 6 years have had very high levels of ice. In fact, the winter of 2014 had the highest level of ice in the Environment Canada record. A lot of ice means that the water is cold, and when it's frozen over, it's definitely not evaporating. And the reason there was so much ice the last few years is because the air was very cold. This is a graph of winter average maximum temperatures at all Great Lakes states, United States Historical Climatology Network stations. You can see that winter afternoon temperatures have been declining in the Great Lakes states for the last 80 years, and that 2014 was actually one of the lowest on record. It's not a surprise that the very low temperatures in 2014 were associated with record high levels of ice. Ice being associated with cold is a concept which almost everyone understands, except for climate scientists. Climate scientists believe that the high levels of ice were due to trapped heat in the atmosphere. And it makes sense if you have the IQ of a turnip. Now let's look at winter nighttime temperatures. This is a graph going back to 1895 of the percent of cold winter nights at all Great Lakes states, United States Historical Climatology Network stations. Yellow is the percent of nights below 10 degrees Fahrenheit, red is the percent below 5 degrees Fahrenheit, and blue is the percent below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 18°C. The coldest winters were the winters of 1977, 1978, and 1979 during the Ice Age scare. but 2014 was up there in the top 5. And then winters got warmer from the late 70s until about the year 2000, when all those predictions of Great Lakes doom were coming out, which we looked at earlier. 2001, Canadian scientists say that global warming is going to lower the level of the Great Lakes 2 to 5 feet. Also in 2001, University of Michigan professor says global warming is almost certainly going to lead to lower lake levels. And then in 2009, big climate change headed Michigan's way study says, with Great Lakes water levels plummeting. But now let's go back to our graph of the percent of cold winter nights around the Great Lakes. You can see that after the year 2000, the percent of cold nights started to increase again and got very high around the year 2014. And now climate scientists say that the high water levels currently on the Great Lakes are also due to global warming. So when the frequency of cold nights decreases, the amount of ice goes down. And when the frequency of cold nights increases, the amount of ice goes up. But the trend over the last 120 years is non-existent. It's just cyclical. It goes up, goes down, up, down, up, down, up, down. It's nothing to do with global warming. And we see the same pattern in the water levels graph. We get cycles where it goes up, down, up, down, up, down, but there's no long-term trend. In many ways, climate scientists are like ambulance chasing lawyers. Whatever the current weather is, they say, we know what's causing it and you need to send us money in order to stop it from happening. And of course, they're counting on the fact that most people won't remember what they said in the past and that people will believe them when they say they predicted it all along, even though they predicted the exact opposite. Snake oil, the art of healing and truth-telling. The truth in climate science is that academics know that if they say the right things, they'll get recognition, they'll get publicity, they'll get their name on the front page of the newspaper, and most of all, they'll get grant money. But if they ever did any actual science, like my friend Dr. Bill Gray did, their funding would get cut off, they would be ostracized, they'd be viciously attacked, and Democrats in Congress would want to have them investigated. Climate science is a total farce. It reminds me of a Monty Python level skit. Except this is real life. These people have no interest in trying to understand what's really going on in the climate. There's a reward system set up for them to say the right things, and doing actual science is not a part of it. Climate science is a complete farce, and someone with a lot of money is using this junk science to try to seize control of the global energy supply. And as I've been emphasizing in my recent videos, it's the EPA CO2 endangerment finding which makes it possible. It gives them the legal basis to shut down energy producers in the United States. If we're going to save the country from these mobsters, the key thing is getting that CO2 endangerment finding repealed. What I'm doing is exposing the non-existent science behind the imaginary climate crisis. But what our politicians need to do is demand that the CO2 endangerment finding be accurately reviewed for the first time. The basis of the CO2 endangerment finding is junk science, just like what we've been looking at for the past 8 minutes. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science, propaganda, and organized crime for a long time.